there's been a lot of confusion. We hear about electrics and alternative fuels, and how are we going to get that message across as to the potential without overinflating what these technologies might do? And any thoughts?
I think that's part of the commitment that the electric industry is making. There is an education component to understand how environmentally friendly electric vehicles are, and issues around usage, issues around charging opportunities and the like. So one of our commitments will be to focus on that sort of education process. Our problem is that we have literally hundreds and hundreds of utilities around the country. Getting the industry as an industry to agree to do something really will mean we can focus and bring to bear a lot of resources.
I think what the consumer would love to hear. I woke up this morning to listen to a General Motors ad that said, if you don't like it, bring it back to us. We'll take it back. Why don't we offer plug-in hybrid with the same policy? If you don't like it, bring it back.
Well, we could. Bill, you want to make a commitment to that?
Well, yeah, I mean...
No, just kidding.
Well, in fact, it's interesting. Well, there's...
Yeah.
We'll talk about that campaign at another time. But at the very mundane level, and this is at the very mundane level, the dealers have to understand the technology. Because
right.
if a customer comes in, you don't want the dealer steering them to something else because they're more familiar with it. And in the early days of the pure hybrid, when we launched the Escape Hybrid, I don't know that we did enough dealer education early on to explain to them that you know, there were no compromises. This was actually a real net benefit for the customer. And so, and I think, so just as Tony said, through the utility world, there has to be education. We have to educate the end customer, but in our case, we also have to educate our dealers, because I think that's something that, you know, the customer can come in with the very best of intentions in wanting a vehicle. But any of us who've ever been in a dealership know that a dealer can quickly try and turn you to another vehicle if they're more comfortable or perceive it's an easier sell. And we have to do our part there.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. In fact, that was one of the questions here. Governor, do you have a comment on that, on the education?
I would just flip it to say not only do the customers have to be educated, but just to pick up on your point, I think we have got to educate a workforce to be able to build these vehicles. And that's why the investment, as you guys have said, in R&D, and our investment in our R&D, our human capital, is so very critical.
Yeah, there's no question about that. And that probably, to me, is one of the scariest things that we're dealing with today. And it's a global competition related to knowledge. And I'm not sure we're going to be able to match up to it.
Can I quote you in Lansing?
Absolutely.
As we go through our budget battles over the K through 12
it's
budget.
tough. I know this is a big issue that you're dealing with.
It's a huge issue. It's a huge
real time.
issue.
And
I appreciate business people understanding the importance of creating that workforce that you need to be able to build the cars or the technologies of the future.
The workforce of the future, to build, to design, to do the pioneering, long lead research, that's all really, really important. And here's this is a question on the dealers, and the dealer, to the average consumer, you don't think about it here if you live in the Detroit area and you interface with the auto companies, but the dealer is the face of the company to the average person. And it says, please discuss the new role of the auto dealer as the integrator of products, services, technologies, policies for the customer, and how critical it is to consumer acceptance. And I think, Bill, you really nailed that in your
and I don't want to belabor it, but one of the bright spots of the dark period we've been through is that we've rationalized our dealer body, and we've really got the best dealers now that are still standing. And I think one of the elements we can point to in that is we've launched the Fusion Hybrid, and that has been exceptionally well received by the dealers, and they then in turn are able to really explain it and to lead the customer to it. And so just as the early days with maybe the Escape Hybrid we didn't do enough, I think we did do it with the Fusion Hybrid, and it's paying off. So it just underscores the importance of dealer knowledge in this regard.
Yeah, and that balance of not pushing something too early or too late, and getting people to understand it in a language they can understand. There's a friend of mine in Ann Arbor by the name of Charles Eisendrath, who runs the Journalism Fellow Program at the University of Michigan, and many of you know Charles. And I first met Charles when he was a science writer for Time Magazine, and he was a journalism fellow himself. And we had lunch one day. I was a young faculty member. I'll never forget his comment. He said, I write for an educated audience, but the technology is very complicated. How do I convey the essence of the technology without changing something? And you look at how much more complicated it is today, and how can we get those messages across is certainly critical. Governor, would the state of Michigan lead the change to upgrade the electrical grid? Could we get some stimulus funds, or what can we do?
Yeah, in fact, I think we have supported the application of our utility companies to be able to get some of the stimulus monies that the Department of Energy is putting forward. And I just have to say here, you know, when we all talk about the different roles in this economy, the government's role in investing in infrastructure is just so critical, whether it's human infrastructure like universities or education, or the harder infrastructure associated with the utilities is critical. I really applaud the Obama, I mean, I am a Democrat, so I like the Obama administration anyway, but I really, no kidding, I mean, if you don't have policy and a federal government that is invested in the money, the upfront money to be able to make this ubiquitous, then we know private sector investment can do that. You're not going to see that level of rate raising to you know, amortize the increases over the population. So it is really important to have that federal government. And just one other point that you were making, I think, Ray, about the policy changes that other countries have developed. You know, 3 weeks ago I was sitting right here with the Midwest Governors Association governors, and we invited a representative from the Netherlands and a representative from Great Britain. And they were saying that their policy changes that they have made have just, you know, obviously made them leapfrog so far ahead of the United States. But in addition to that, those policy changes, and this is for someone like me who's trying to bring in jobs, those policy changes have created jobs. And often in the US, we have operated out of fear rather than opportunity. And the job creation opportunities that are associated with having a progressive climate policy are enormous. And that's why the message about operating really in a prospective, not looking in the rearview mirror constantly. And it's true with the utility. I appreciate your leadership, Tony, on this, because I think you've been very a positive force, because there's a lot of Midwestern governors who have been fearful about the climate change bill and what it would do for jobs. But they're only looking at opportunity.
I think that's a good point. And it's hard sometimes to look ahead. I think at Dr. Rue's comments in the earlier panel, it was interesting to hear about, in this sense, they are moving so fast that they can leapfrog some of the steps that we have had as a more evolutionary society, just like cell phones instead of running lots of wires. And that is an enormous potential advantage in some economies, that they do not have a well-established infrastructure in many respects.
Yeah, let me add a comment to what the governor is talking about in terms of policy. There's no question policy change is fundamental here, but the government is now playing a different role, and the consumer reaction to it, or the population reaction to it, has been uneven on whether the government should be pouring money into General Motors or Chrysler or into the industry, and what's this all about, just, you know, supporting jobs. It is not unusual for the U.S. federal government to fund the development of new industries, and I think we have to look at this as a new, or it's certainly a rebirth of our ability to compete in the U.S. auto, or in the worldwide auto industry. And so I think it's very appropriate that the government jump-start it. Private capital has disappeared. Private capital, other than some venture capital of about $4 billion, almost $5 billion of venture capital was spent in renewable technologies last year. That starts to compete with software and semiconductors. That will not be adequate. And we need, so all this tax equity investing is gone now. I mean, the economy has just wiped out private capital. There's a lot of capital there, but it has to come back to the market. The government has been a terrific partner to step into that void and make sure we do not miss our chance to compete in the world.